Welcome to another episode of Alpha Intuition Podcast, where we empower you to become the CEO of your life. I'm your host, Keisha Blair, number one life balancing coach and certified extreme execution coach. And today I have a truly inspiring guest for you guys. Joining us and he is the president and owner of Deal Heal Fulfill Org, and he hosts two podcasts, Girl Dad Discussions and Deal to Heal with E. James. He is deeply committed to helping others overcome life struggles. His mission is rooted in his powerful motto: deal with your problems, heal from your pain, fulfill your purpose. And today he's bringing his passion for mental health awareness, especially around depression and suicide in the workplace. And he's not only a podcaster, a speaker, author, and a bricklayer, y'all. He is also the secretary for the Next Level Speakers Academy Chicago chapter. So, Alpha Intuition family, I'm thrilled to welcome Mr. Earnest James to the show. What's up, Ernest?
What up? What's up? What's up? I thought I was here like, there's some horns, some rah, rah, rah.
I'm working on that. That'll be in when I start monetizing just a little bit more. I'm gonna get one of them big, nice what they're not called switches. What are those things called?
The mixers.
Roadcaster. Yeah, gotta give you one of them big time mixers. But until then, I'm gonna have to do a one.
Right. It works.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So what is up? How have you been? What's been going on?
Man, I've been good. A lot of moving parts going on right now. And I'm appreciative of it. You know, a lot of blessings, a lot of, putting my hands in a lot of different areas. But all in places that I want to be involved in, and so I'm just blessed right now, and I'm just trying to get to the space where I can indulge myself fully into my passions, So that means I gotta, like you talking about, they got to monetize at some point, and that way I can jump out of this 9 to 5 and go straight all passion and purpose work.
That's right. All right, we're gonna jump right into it then. All right. So today I want to talk about, I'm in this space where I'm talking about this corporate relationships or working relationships. And I think something that's always really forgotten about is the blue collar side of leadership. So we're going to talk about maintenance, and we're going to talk about construction, because you're a bricklayer, I'm an electrician. So, this is something that's very, very familiar to us. So let's talk about your journey just in the construction world and beyond, and how you got into this mental health space to where you just basically want to help others to heal from pain.
You know what? So I'll say this. I grew up in a space where I knew early that I liked it to build stuff. I remember building a clubhouse in like a literal clubhouse in a tree. You know what I mean? And it had a little fireman pole where you can slide down to get when you get ready to get out. And, the little ladders built it, the ladders on the tree to climb up. And I was really young and just knew. And I would say I built a go-kart, like out of wood and wagon parts. And I was so young. And now as an adult, I always think back, like, I don't even know how I knew how to do it, because I did it by myself. I didn't know how I knew how to do it. I don't know how I even knew how to use the tools, because my dad was a mechanic. So we had plenty of tools, but it was just something that I, instinctively, picked up on. And so I knew I wanted to go into construction. Wasn't clear where I wanted to go. And so by the time I was in 8th grade, we had to do a project on, what do you want to do with your future? And so I really started diving into different occupations in the construction field. And once I had seen bricklayer, I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do, And when I got out of high school, I didn't know anything about the unions. I didn't know anything about apprenticeships. All I think I knew was, you want to go to construction, you got to go to college, But what I found in college, outside of electrician and carpentry, there's not really many classes on the different trades in college. Like, there's no bricklayer class in college. You know what I'm saying? It's basically, like I said, just carpentry and electrician. So I went and I was taking carpentry classes. I actually became a carpenter first. Fast forward a couple years later, I run into a guy who is a bricklayer and was in the union, and he told me about apprenticeships. And then I signed up, and then 17 years later, here I am.
Wow, that is amazing. And you mentioned something about, when you're in high school, they don't really talk about apprenticeship programs and different things like that, and just that avenue that people have to take to go down that skilled labor road. We always push kids to talk about college and what they need to do, and basically that puts them in debt. And one thing I'm very
Yeah,
grateful for as going through the apprenticeship program, it actually helped me to actually pay off debt because I didn't really have any once I finished the apprenticeship program, but it also allowed me to pay for college as I went through
right.
college. So it's not like it's saying either or. You can do both. You just have to be strategic about doing it.
Yeah, and I don't know why, because we had automotive in high school. We had whole carpentry class in high school, which I took. So my high school wasn't like, uh, how can I say it? Like, they believed in the trades, because we had the programs, but they just, when it came to the education of outside of high school, it was like college. Like, they never talked about the trades and the unions and things like that, which would be more beneficial to the students, like you said, because you get started without any debt, and you don't necessarily have to pick up debt. You know what I'm saying? Like, because you start working almost right away. So you're
Exactly.
working in the field while you're learning.
Exactly.
So I don't know. Maybe it's this thing with the schools when you go to college and keep you in that rat race, but like, it's not necessary.
Absolutely. And it's not, and if that's what somebody wants to do, 100%, if that's the road that they want to take, I'm all for it. Like I said, my children, they've all been to college, except for the third one, and he's in this Gen Z slash what Generation Alpha, to where they wake up and they're automatically born entrepreneurs, which is not bad either. It just depends on what avenue you want to take. But I think what some people miss when it comes to skilled labor is that there's whatever, sometimes when you look at a building or think about where you want to work, somebody's got to put that building up. Somebody's got to erect it. Somebody has to install the certain things in it. And who's going to be that person? So it was good that you found that early in your life, to where, you found your passion for bricklaying, because that's definitely a need for that
Yeah,
skill.
yeah, and I'm very passionate now, because I think about, had I known about the apprenticeships and got right in after high school, how much faster I would have been able to accomplish some of the things that I wanted to accomplish. Now, I do think, like, I bought my first house when I was 26, I think,
Hmm.
26, and kind of was on there. But in between that time, from 18 to 26, that's a nice amount of years. Because I didn't get into the bricklayers till I was 25, so had I got in straight out of high school, how much time would I have knocked out? How much earlier could I have bought my first house and, be able to afford the things that I later on was able to do after becoming a bricklayer. Like, I could have been, by the time I was 25, I could already have my house and truck and motorcycle and all those things that I didn't get to later on, but I could have been already on my way had I known what I know now. So because of that, I'm very passionate about sharing the trades and doing presentations at schools and organizations to present that to the kids as an outlet. Like, look, you might not want to go to college, but you still can have a rewarding career that pays you well, that you can get started right away.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that we have in common, because we're both in AI resistant category jobs too. And there are plenty of them far beyond the skilled trades, but having a skilled trade is definitely something that is resistant to AI, because, it may be able to design, but I don't think it's developed enough to where it's going to be able to install, not with the precision
No.
that it can, and be able to see things and make corrections, for people who actually have a passion and take pride in their craftsmanship.
Yeah, yeah, and that even goes back to, as you know, on the job site, you got the engineers, and then you got the actual workers. Like, it looks good on paper. You got the architect, and he draws up this whole thing, and like, this is how it's supposed to look. But when we go to build it, we like, Joe, that don't work. You
The
know
only
what
way
I'm
is first
saying?
in your brain, okay?
I'm
Only place
like,
it's
that
gonna
don't
work is
work,
in your
man.
mind. Like,
But
the concept is great, but we actually bring their ideas to fruition 100%. We make their ideas work as the
yeah,
installers. 100%. I agree with
yeah.
that.
And that's why AI can't do what we do, because I
No.
mean, it's hard enough to get an architect to change the design, when we were physically making it come to life, and we was like, okay, you got to change this part because it doesn't necessarily work in real life. but trying to get an AI to change things, it's not going to work. At some point, like you said, you gotta have the skilled labor. You got to be able to, bring it to real life, and that takes some adjusting, with the mental and being able to look at it and observe and say, okay, what can we do to make this work? And it doesn't always work on paper the way it works in real life.
And that really just has a great skill for thinking outside the box and looking at it as a whole and understanding, okay, just from your experience and troubleshooting knowledge on what you needed to do or what you need to do to make it work like it was intended to work. Because sometimes, um, engineers, they have great minds as well. That's why they are the designers and the creators. But like we said, we see it and we take their idea and actually make it work as they intended it to. So, both we work hand in hand. When you have the installers and you have the engineers, we all work together.
Yep.
Sometimes they don't see it that way.
Right, they're like, you're changing it. Like, we gotta change it. You know what I mean?
You want it to work, you got to change it.
Right.
Adjustments. Absolutely. Oh man. So, and let me ask you this question. So let's talk about the mental health space and how you came to have a passion for that on your road to the skilled trades.
Well, I grew up in church, right? I grew up in church and grew up as a PK, which is a pastor's kid or preacher's kid for
Yeah,
those who
I
don't
didn't know
know.
that. Me too. My dad was a minister. I know all about it.
Yeah. So as you know, we grow up doing
In the church all day,
social
every
work.
day.
Yeah. Right. That's a whole nother story. But we grow up doing like social work, right? We grow up going to the nursing homes and the special homes and having service with them and visiting them and the homeless and things like that. We grew up doing that type of work, right? And so that early developed a heart I guess I think I probably already had it in me, but definitely the heart for caring for people started really early, and that never went away, and I just built on it as I grew. So when we got to, the construction site, I was already, as an adult, still doing this type of work, still, giving a heart, feeding the homeless, all those things. But now I'm in this space where I know what I'm going through mentally and health wise, and also being able to see the men and the women around me that's dealing with the same things. However, we're not addressing it necessarily head on, especially in the construction space, because it is a male dominated space.
Mhm.
And as men, we don't like to show weakness. And most people don't know it's very competitive, right? Because
Yes.
you're everybody want to be the best. I'm the best bricklayer. I'm the fastest bricklayer. I'm the best carpenter. Or everybody is very competitive. So not only is it competitive, so you're
We
not.
call those electrical gods. We have them in our yes, they're not competitive, they're electrical gods. They created electricity. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right. Well, it's just that mindset and that culture of the industry, which doesn't leave a lot of space for us to be vulnerable, right? To admit these are the things that we're going through. But unfortunately, in this construction industry, we're one of the higher industries among suicide. We also one of the higher industries among divorce. Because it's just a lot that goes into being a tradesman, and working every day, and how to adjust when the economy slows down, how to adjust when you're at the end of a project and there's not another project for another one of couple months or whatever. So it's like learning to budget, financially, learning how to balance your family, because they got to understand when the times are slow. You know what I'm saying? And all those things plays a part. And so just me being in those spaces and dealing with those same things is like, man, I know I'm not the only one that's dealing with these things, and then just being in the space of, okay, what can I do to help? And then as a speaker, like, hey, let's talk about it. So now I'm just like, I'm the first one to admit, I've been through divorce, I've been through depression, I've been through suicide ideation, and all those things. And by me being vulnerable enough to say it, or be the first one to say it, has opened up the doors for others.
Yes. Absolutely, 100%. I agree with that. Um, like you said, when when you're working in the skilled trades, you never know where your next job is going to be because basically you're
Mhm.
working yourself out of a job. Once that project or that building is complete, you have to move on. And if you're part of the union, you have to go back and sign the books or go travel or do whatever. And that can take a toll on your mental psyche. It can take a toll on
Mhm.
your family, and you may be laid off for a long time. Don't know what that is. So we understand as tradespeople that we take advantage of those jobs where we can work 7/12s,
Mhm.
6/10s. We work all those long shifts for those moments because we stock up so where we can survive when the project is over, where the work gets
Right.
slow. And sometimes the spouses don't understand that. So yes, I am a divorcee myself. So um, it just happens. Some people they can't take that or understand how to function in that space. And there you go, you have the mental health issues, and then you still have to show up at work, and you're going through a divorce. You still have to show up at work when you may have bills to pay, and that you're probably on like the furlough list or you're on the layoff list, and knowing this job is getting ready, and you're dealing with all of these things, but you still got to show up to work.
Yeah.
And that you have those mental health issues, definitely. Mm.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that you have to be able to talk to your spouse about. Again, we're at the top of the list of divorce for a reason, and finances play a high part in divorce. Period. But when you're in this field, because you could be making good money at one time and then no money a week later. You know what I'm saying? And so, again, being able to sit down and have that conversation, like, this is what I do, and then I'll just speak from my experience. Like I said, I knew I wanted to be a bricklayer when I was in 8th grade. So it's not so easy when you got to have the conversation with your spouse because you've been laid off again, and they like, well, won't you go do something else? Like, this is what I do. You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying? Like, this is my heart. This is what I love to do. And it's not so easy just to be like, all right, throw my dreams away or whatever, just to go get a 9 to 5 somewhere else, but that's more consistent. It's like, this is what I do. You know what I'm saying? This is my job. And you gotta, when we say our vows is for better or worse, like, okay, it's for better or worse. When we making a lot of money, you ain't complaining. When we ain't making a lot of money, don't complain then. We here for the long ride, and so, but unfortunately, finances do play a big part, um, in our marriages and things. And if our spouse can't adjust to that, and be able to live with that reality, it does cause some problems in the household.
Exactly. So when you talk about just those problems and issues that we face in the world of skilled labor, there aren't really. You mentioned that people are. You have to. You can't show weakness. So you
Mhm.
really want to go to work. And of course, you have your tool buddy. You may talk to that person if you trust that person. Most of the time, you see your working partner more so than you see your family at home because you're at work more than you're at home.
Right.
And person that you talk to, but that person is not a skilled person in mental health. They're just somebody
Right.
that's the listening ear, and they're probably sharing your problems like you're sharing yours. And as you mentioned about, as far as this suicide rate being so high amongst skilled workers, what are some of the programs that are out there to help combat some of those issues that people have on the job site or the construction site?
Well, they have been a lot more um, programs that's related, that are actually offered through the unions and through our health packages now. There are some counseling services that are free. There's family counseling that's free, which is good, again, because we're high on the divorce rate. So they've accumulated a lot of programs now that I don't think existed some years ago. But
Mhm.
now, because it's so relevant, there are things, and they're pushed heavily too, like, for you to know, like, there are resources out here now. We do provide even drug abuse resources, which is a whole nother thing amongst the trades, alcohol abuse, all of those
Mhm.
things. Again, just trying to deal with the pressures of being in this industry. Somebody has to do it. Somebody got to build the buildings, but along with that comes a lot of depression and things. And I remember even not just while you're working, but after you're working. So I had a good friend of mine. The last couple of years, we worked side by side. We worked together over the years, but the last couple of years, we were working on the same jobs. We were together a lot, and he was forced into retirement because he ended up getting sick on the job. And it was way after he was supposed to retire. We had actually had a retirement party for him and everything. And then he came back the next year. We're like, what are you doing?
But we pick up a collection. We need that money back if you're gonna come back to work.
Right. We had a cake and everything. You're like, dude, we already did this. But he came back, and what I realized through him, and also even with my grandfather, knowing my grandfather went through a similar situation, is that we identify, especially as men, we identify so much with what we do for a living, with our work and the work that we do, that once we are pulled away from that, we kind of go through a season of depression almost, because it's like, well, who am I now? Who am I without this thing that has taken up so much of my life, this thing that I've used and I've built over time, and unfortunately for my friend, he probably, once he ended up getting sick during COVID, or like right toward the end of COVID, and got forced into retirement, and definitely started dealing with depression, because he lived alone. He has a daughter, he has some kids, but they're all grown adults and, on their own. And he lived by himself, and so he would call me different times. I would go over to see him and hang out with him. But just being in that space of like, okay, now I've got all this time and I've still got energy and I don't have nowhere to put it. And then feeling alone because, like you mentioned, we spend so much time with each other on the job site, like that becomes your second family, and then if you live alone like he did, it really becomes your main family, and so when you retire and now you don't have, your camaraderie of your working environment, your work family, then you don't have your regular family to fall back on, you do fall into this space of depression and just kind of filled that out. And, unfortunately, like my friend, depression is a real thing and it affects your body. And, he ended up passing away probably a year or two after he retired, which is a real thing in our industry too. So it's a lot of pressures and things that we deal with, that just from the outside looking in, most people wouldn't even think about it. It's like, oh, it's a construction worker. You that stereotype of the strong man and, doing things and building things, like, yeah, but mentally there's a lot of stuff that we deal with in our workspace.
Yeah, it's just like they don't even think about the person's mind. It's just, you just worry about physically what the person can do. You reminded me of a site that I worked on, and it was almost complete. And so they started allowing some of the people to move into the commercial building. And I believe it was the cafeteria. We may have been sitting there eating lunch, and it was the person who may have been over that, the manager, walked in and was just in an uproar. Went and found the foreman and was like, I don't want these nasty construction workers sitting inside my restaurant or sitting inside. And one guy just went and said, he just kind of stopped and was like, hey, he was like, these nasty construction workers are the reason why you even have a building to work in. And I think people lose sight of that. You know what I mean? When you think about, they're more than just somebody who's just here to just construct something, but they're also people. Right. And without people in the skilled labor, you wouldn't have those buildings. So, and that person that needs to keep their mind sane so that they can do the things that they need to do to construct that building with craftsmanship. So yes, definitely, mental health is something that needs to be prioritized, especially in the skilled labor world.
Yeah, because it's so many things that affects the work that we do, and that's part of it too. Not even being appreciated for the work that you do, and especially like the finished product is one thing with the. I think all of it needs to be appreciated, but it's the things that you can't see a lot of times that get the least appreciation. And with you being an electrician, it's like when people come in, they just want to hit the button and the light come on. Like, well, there's a whole operation that goes before that.
Preventing that we did to get all those pipes up there in the ceiling to run that wire through so that you can hit that switch and turn those lights on. Right, you know what I mean? Right. Think about that. That's a lot of craftsmanship that goes into stuff like that. And then, so also just thinking about from the finished product standpoint, and I don't know about you, but I've actually had moments to where I've worked with people. I've been accused of it myself to where before that project is finished, you want to put your name on it somewhere. So, I
Mhm.
don't know if you have a brick that you may sign, a piece of pipe for me that I may sign, you know what I mean? It's something that we want to know that I was here, right?
Right.
Because our work.
Yeah, I remember we were working on a high school. We were working on a high school, and one of the things, especially when you have brick that has different shades in the brick, they're like,
Yeah.
okay, you got to be careful of not laying the same shade in a row,
Mhm.
because when you look at the full out the finished product, it looks like a line, like it's a line in the wall. So when you
Mhm.
have bricks with different colors and stuff, you want to mix them up so it just looked like a pattern like that. And I remember working on that project, and guys saying, I'm a make an E in the wall. Just like I'm literally gonna like lay these bricks. So at the end, when you look at it, there's definitely an E in the wall,
Oh my
just to
goodness.
be able to say I did that. You know what I
With the
mean?
different
But
colors of the bricks. Ah, how
yeah.
nice. See,
So
see,
you're
and
able to
that's
do that. You definitely get in trouble for it because again, they were like, dude, what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? But again, when you do that, like the high school was a couple year job. I think it was like 3 years, to build that high school. And I remember when we got to like the last brick and they out, there's always like not necessarily a ceremony, but it's
yeah.
like a thing, you know what I mean? Like you're laying the last brick. And I had the last couple years, I was with two projects that I was a part of. I was able to lay the last brick for 2 years,
Nice.
and everybody's like, all right, this is it, y'all, and it's kind of crazy because everybody's like watching you, right? So everybody quits and kind of standing around like, all right, Ernest gonna lay the last brick. You know what I mean? So it's like, all right, we
Wow.
lay that last brick, and I was like, all right, it's done. It's a done deal. And but yeah, we take pride in what we do, and especially when we're building things that's going to be around for a while, like a high school, like a monument or a building of some sort, a church. One of my first outside um, things that I built was a church, and it was a big AME church, a real,
Mhm.
really big church, beautiful church. And, I drive past it every now and then because it's not too far from where I live. So I'm able to drive past it every now and then. Just like, yeah, 17 years ago, when I was starting off and as an apprentice, I was working on this, building this church that has been here
Wow.
for almost 20 years now, and I've talked to somebody actually as a speaker. I didn't go, but I called the school to, come in as a speaker of the high school that we worked in, that we was working on, because I haven't been back to that school since we finished it. I haven't even
Mhm.
seen it as a finished product, and so that's been one of the things that's been on my mind. Like, yeah, I got to just get over there and, be able to go inside the school. Like I've been on the outside, but like, no, I want to go inside because there was a lot of walls and rubbing walls and all the things that we do on that goes into the inside of the building that don't get talked about or don't get seen. But just being able to go back after and see the finished product of what you spend 3 or 4 years building, to be able to do that, it's amazing.
Absolutely. And then you mentioned something too. So you talk about, just the skill that it takes to do what we do as skilled laborers. You have to keep your mind fresh for stuff like that. It's not just you can just go and lay those bricks. Like I said, you mentioned you have to put them in a certain spot. You have to make
Mhm.
sure that they're laid out a certain way. You have to mentally think about stuff like that. You can't show up to work and be depressed and be thinking about other stuff. You're not going to be focused on your project, and potentially you could actually get hurt, get yourself killed, or get somebody else killed by not
Yeah.
focusing and being mentally cognizant of what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, and I do know that we deal with stuff, right? Because again, we are human. So I actually, after I became a bricklayer, I remember losing my mother-in-law at the time and my mom, not
Mm,
too far apart. And I remember going to my apprenticeship class, right? Because we have our days that we have to work, and then we have our one day a week that we actually go to class to learn, the hands-on and things that we need to learn as an apprentice. And I remember going there and having to take time to go into the office with my instructor and have that conversation because I was so down, dealing with, the loss of my mom's and, being able just to have that space to even with him to be vulnerable, and really admit like, man, I'm hurting right now. And I remember even in church, like I said, we grew up in church. As a minister, I was a minister at that time, and I remember sitting in the pulpit on a Sunday, on the over to we our chairs is like over to the side, but I remember sitting over there and breaking down, crying, in the pulpit, around during that time period.
Mhm.
And it's like, man, you're dealing with those feelings, you're dealing with that depression, like that you go through, like everyone. But we have to have the mechanisms in place. We have to have the people that we can go to have these conversations. And again, and in the construction field, that's why I'm so open about the things that I've been through now, because I'm like, somebody got to be like, look, I'm here, I did it,
Yeah.
I've dealt with it, because once we are able to admit ourselves and be vulnerable with ourselves, it opens up the door for everyone else to be like, okay, I'm dealing with it too, because we already know we're dealing with it. We know the statistics, you know what I mean? We know that, on the back end, we know everything that we deal with, but we're not necessarily dealing with it in real time. And so when we are vulnerable enough to say and admit, like, okay, I ain't got to be the tough guy on the job. This is what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with
Yeah.
depression. I'm dealing with divorce. Then everyone else can let their guard down, and then we can have the conversations.
Yeah, I mean, and especially like when you're in a leadership role, like where you have to talk about dealing with our personal struggles, when you have apprentices, or you have, you're responsible for making sure that that job is completed the way that it's
Mhm.
supposed to be, and you have all these people that are working under you. That can be a tough battle for anybody.
Yeah, yeah. And you it goes so fast when before you realize, and I remember even myself coming to the realization that when you come in, you're the apprentice, right? So you got this 4-year
Yeah.
apprenticeship that you start with, and you come in, you're doing your thing, and you're working, and before you know it, you realize that you become the old guy on the job. And now the
Right.
apprentices are coming to you, and you like, wait, when did that happen? Because I was just the one asking questions, not too long ago, and now someone is asking me questions, and I'm, being a leader on a job, and I'm teaching the apprentices, the on the job stuff. It's like, when did that happen?
Yeah. It's like you realize that when people are constantly coming to ask you questions, and it's like, am I the old head on the job?
Yep.
Like, wait a
Yeah.
minute. You have all these people who are in their either late teens or 20s, and here you are in your 40s, some of us in our 50s, and it's like, wow, yeah, it's like, I guess I am.
Yep.
It's like it's been 30 years,
Yep.
and then it just makes me think about moments to when I was early on in my career, to where I may have said something to someone who had been in the skill trade, and it's like somebody may say something like, well, like, this person has probably forgotten more than you'll ever know. You might want to,
Mhm.
tone back how you
Yeah.
just your conversation with them, because trust me, they know way more than you even thought about not knowing. So,
Right. Right.
yep,
Yeah.
and then here it is, 30 years later. Yeah, I've been in construction, been an electrician for 30 years.
Yep. I think it's man, maybe 20 at this point. I always say 17, but it can't be 17 every year, right? I think it may. I think I might be on 20, 22 years. I think it's been, So yeah, it's been a journey.
You in the old head category. You're approaching, rapidly approaching. Yes, yes, yes.
Yep.
Right. So I look. I want to ask you about. I know I mentioned this in your introduction. I want to ask you about your podcast. So you have two podcasts. You have one that's called Girl Dad Discussions, and
Mhm.
Heal with E. James.
Yeah, yeah. So the deal to heal came first, right? So they're both connected, right? But the deal to heal came first. And what happened with that, even in that space, we talk about divorce. I've been divorced twice, and so when I came out of my second divorce, I was really at this space is like, okay, what's going on? Why am I having trouble in my relationships, or should I say, in my marriages? And what does that look like? Because I was raised in a two-parent household. So I've had the example my whole life of what that looks like. And I'm like, okay, why it's not working? Why it's not working for me? But one of the things I realized was every woman I ever dated was a fatherless daughter. And so that
Mm,
brought us on um, experiences that was quite different from my upbringing, right? My upbringing in a two-parent household, strong father, strong mother, and then dating women that came from a single mother household where the mom filled a lot of those spaces and had to make do with what she had. Well, when you take those two different, very different backgrounds and bring them together, they don't always mesh well. You know what I mean? But I came to that realization, and so I started a page on Instagram called Friends to Fatherless Daughters. And because I have one daughter from my first marriage, my daughter's so I started a page on Instagram called Friends to Fatherless Daughters because my daughter is my only biological child, right? And my daughter's 21 now. But I thought about from the standpoint of a father, and from dating fatherless daughters, and also from being in a family where I have five sisters and being able to watch my dad raise my five sisters, So I went to Instagram. I started this page called Friends to Fatherless Daughters, and just giving my advice as a father, and my connection with fatherless daughters. And so a young lady called me one day or DM me and said, "Would you like to be on my podcast?" So I said, "Okay, cool." So we did her podcast. After her podcast, I think I did like 7. It was almost like in a row. People just started calling me. So I'm like, okay. And so I met. They were all virtual, and so I ended up meeting one of the hosts of one of the podcasts in person, and we met for lunch and we were talking, and he said, "Well, I think you should have your own podcast." And so I was like, okay, I thought about it and thought about what I wanted the premise to be and things of that nature. And that's where the Deal to Heal came from. Deal with your problems, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose, which is kind of my thing that I like to help people do. And so fast forward 150 some episodes later,
Nice.
we've been rocking. And so again, it ties in with the Girl Dad Discussions podcast because whenever I would have a girl dad on, I would always ask them 2 questions. What does it mean for you to be a girl dad? And what is something that your daughter has taught you? And I always got good responses to and good answers to that question. And so I said, well, let's turn this into a whole nother podcast itself and really dive into the relationship of the girl dad. And the daughters. And so I started the Girl Dad Discussions podcast in order to combat the narrative of the absent father and the fatherless daughter. And so that's where that started. So last year on Father's Day, I released the first episode, and we've been kicking since then. I think we're close to 40 some episodes now on that podcast. And so yeah, that's my 2. I had another one. We might start it back up. I had a third one with me and my brother called the Earn and Irv podcast because I'm Ernest, he's Irvin. But he wasn't quite ready. And so we got like 6 episodes in. I'm like, come on, man, you got to show up. And so we had to put a pause on that one until he kind of, get his bearings under him and get comfortable being in front of the mic and all that stuff. But yeah, but that's where I'm at now. I got 2 podcasts.
Nice. And some people don't realize how much work it is to keep a podcast going. It might be all fun and games on the front end, but I think they said around episode 21, it's kind of where it makes or breaks your show. If you make it past that, you might be okay. So I'm feeling good. I'm almost to episode 30. But to get past that point, because a lot of shows don't make it past that because it starts to get tedious. You have to think about dedicating your time, and then you find people. You got to think of topics. There's all these things that go into it. So yeah, I understand. You're probably like, nah, I'm good.
and most episodes was actually been said. Most episodes don't make it past episode 6, right? Which is where we stopped at with me and my brother. And so when I got into podcasting, when I started my podcast, I started with a group. And so when we started, it was like 100 of us in the group. And I started a little side chat, after we finished, because we did like a challenge. So I started this like side chat after the challenge, where we all was connected with each other. And out of the 100 and some people that was in that group, is maybe 4 or 5 of us that's actually still podcasting out of 100. And so yeah, it's especially when the pandemic hit, it was like everybody wanted to start a podcast. It's all fun and games, and everybody want a mic. But then once it gets started, and you start realizing the work that comes behind it, most people just want to show up and talk. We're like, no, but it's a whole behind the scenes that goes into that little 30 minutes or hour that you might be watching or listening to. It was a whole production before we get to that point.
Absolutely. And people, I don't think a lot of people realize that. And we, ones that have podcasts do, but the ones outside of that, no, they don't even realize it. So that's really good that you actually saw that. But you mentioned something a minute ago about you realized that all the women that you dated were
Mhm.
fatherless daughters. It's funny you say that because I know a lot of the men that I've dated were motherless sons to where they
Mm.
didn't have mothers in their lives. So I saw that there was a different dynamic, that it was different from dating someone who may have had both parents in the household as opposed to a man who didn't really have his mother in his life or didn't have a good relationship with his mother, and how that person thought about women, treated women, or even men may have had their mother but grew up in a single parent household to where the
Mhm.
mother was the person who was raising them, and then their outlook on women because they saw their mother struggle or may have had multiple children. So I don't want to date a woman that has children. Now, all these different things come into play because of how they grew up in that environment. So that is something that a lot of people don't even deal with that. So to have your motto, which is deal with your problems, heal from your pain, and fulfill your purpose. A lot of people need to understand that before you just launch and go out here and start, dating amongst the people who are out here. Think about trying to heal yourself first before you start
Mhm.
hurting others, because hurt people hurt people.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember doing one podcast, and a young lady asked me, she was like, "Well, how did you know, how did you know that the daddy issues, for lack of a better term, were playing a part in your relationships?" And I said I didn't, because they were
Mm,
all the same. You know what I mean? Because I had
yeah,
only dealt with fatherless daughters, so I'm like, oh well, this is how they act. This is how
yeah.
women act. This is how they show up. It wasn't until I came to that realization and actually started doing research and reading books and looking into that area, that I realized, like, oh, this is not the norm. This is not how they're supposed to show up. This is a result of some a lack of affection. This is a result of not having someone to encourage them and really show them what that love looks like from a male female perspective. Not having a father that's really able to take show them, like, this is what unconditional love looks like, and this is how you're supposed to be treated. Like, there's a lot of things that that they deal with, that they just learn from their environment, and sometimes unfortunately they learn from the generations in front of them. Because one of the questions I would always ask when I talk to fatherless daughters was, what generation of fatherlessness are you? And you
Oh,
find out that there's generation after generation. Is like, my mother was a fatherless daughter, my grandmother was a fatherless daughter, my great grandmother was a fatherless daughter, and you start to see how many generations that it goes back. And the further it goes back, the more some of those mindsets and some of those ideas of just your relationship with men plays a part. Because now you got generations of scorned women, for a lack of better term, that's
mhm.
passing down these ideas, like, well, you don't need a man for this, or this is how you show up and this is how you treat them. And when you get in the real world, it's like, yeah, that don't really work. But that's all because that's the only example that you had. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, and like I mentioned to you, I am, grew up in the church. My father was a minister, and my daddy wasn't going. I'm sorry. It's just certain things. Even as an adult, my father has passed away, and there are still things I would not do. If it's something that I can't tell my father about, I'm not doing it, because my dad was my best friend, and I could tell him
Mhm.
anything. And there were certain things that even as an adult, I thought about, like, no, my father would not approve of me doing that. And you know, I don't know had I would I if I would have still thought that had I not been raised by my father. Because my father,
Mhm.
my parents, my told this story before, but my mother, she lived on the street. She was homeless, and after they broke up, is when she decided she wanted to check out on life. So my younger brother and I went to live with my father. So he raised us. Then he got remarried and found the Lord, and got into church. And just having him in my life to make sure that he kept me grounded and had those conversations with me, I would have been a totally different person had my father not been in my life.
Yeah, yeah, and it plays a part on both sides. Even if you're missing your mom, because you got fatherless daughters, and then, like you said, you got fatherless sons too,
Mhm.
and motherless sons at some point. But that it plays a both part. And I always say it takes two people, a man and a woman, to make a child, and that's the way God set it up. So it also takes both of them to rear a child, so that they're emotionally and balance in everything that they need to do. Can you raise a child by yourself as a single parent? Of course you can, but it's not ideal. You know what I mean? Like that wasn't how it was supposed to be, set up. And so I do believe, and even if it's not the necessarily the biological father, because I'm a mentor too. So I'm in the lives of a lot of boys whose fathers are not there, but still having a male presence to stand up in those spaces to still give that same love and guidance, whether it's male or female, for have that male figure in your life still can give you some of the benefits as if your father was in your life. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I agree with that. And just because the relationship doesn't work out doesn't mean that both parents still can't be there for their child. Because I was
Mhm.
a mother, but my children, their fathers were there for them. I made sure that they had a relationship. Just because my relationship didn't work out doesn't mean that theirs isn't going to work out. So I shouldn't hold that or use my children as pawns, or dangle it in front of this man because we didn't work out. A child
Right.
deserves the opportunity to have that relationship with their father. So I made sure that happened. So yes, my children, their fathers are very active in their lives. Um, and I made sure that I didn't let the relationship that didn't work out affect that. And, a lot
Mhm.
of people need to think about that because we don't even think about growing up, how that may affect that child
Right.
when they reach adulthood, because of course our opinions are shaped by the things that we've gone through in our past, and that can heavily
Yep.
affect someone, as you mentioned about not having a parent, uh, only one parent in their life, and not because there are things that both parents help with. Like you said, it took two
Mhm.
parents to raise a child. It's going to take both people to raise that person.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes almost without saying. It's like you definitely need both. You need both to show up. And like I said, as a mentor, it's unfortunate that for various reasons there may be one parent that's not there for whether it's
Mhm.
the father or the mom, because there are single fathers out here too. And so
Yeah, my dad
sometimes
was a
the
single
dynamic,
father, so yeah.
yeah, and so sometimes that dynamic shows up, but we have to still look for, and this is one thing that I talk to fatherless daughters about too, because I'm generally talking to adult fatherless daughters who now unfortunately have their own children who may be fatherless, and I'm like, okay, that relationship didn't work. So that don't mean that he can't still be a father because he's
Right.
still needed. And if it's, let's say the dad passed away,
Mhm.
so now he can't be there. It's still your responsibility to make sure that your child has some kind of male father figure in their lives. So yeah,
Absolutely.
get them involved in some kind of mentorship, male mentorship, or at the church where there's ministers and deacons, and even a pastor that can kind of be that male role model, like, because they still need that. You know what I mean? So it might not be able to be their biological father, but whether it's an uncle or whoever, they still need that male presence in their lives, boys or girls, or should I say boys and girls? We all need it.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about like just some steps that people can take towards healing, when we're dealing with either mental depression or you're in a relationship and things aren't going right. What are some things that people can do to work towards healing themselves from the inside out?
Well, that's pretty much that's the answer within itself. I would say first you gotta acknowledge it and admit it, right? Admit that I'm going through whatever it is. Admit that I'm dealing with this thing. Because if we can't say to ourselves and just be like, okay, let me be honest with me, this is what I'm dealing with, then we can't address it. We'll just skip around it, you know what I mean? But we can't address the problem head on if we're not even willing to admit that we're dealing with it. And so
Mhm.
once you admit that, okay, I'm dealing with this thing, I acknowledge that it's playing a part in my life. The next step, I always say, start with you, because a lot of times we want to start with the outer person, or we want to start with the things that we're going through that someone else caused. Like, no, you still played a part in that. So you have to start with you also, because that's the only part you can change. You can't change the other person. You can't change how they act. You can't change the things that they do. All you can change is you and your perspective on how you look at things, your perspective on how what you accept in your life, and even how you react to some things. Because I always say, you got to take the time to make sure that there's a difference between acting and reacting. you know. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're reacting, you're doing it as a result of something else. You're acting out as a result of something that someone else said or heard or whatever. So you want to master the acting part. This is how I show up. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I, what I accept, what I don't accept. And so when you're able to master your act, then you don't have to react when someone else does something, you
That
know.
good information. I like that. Master your act so you don't have to react. That is really good. I like that.
Yeah. That's why I
I
say
like it.
start with self, because that's all
That's
we can
right.
change is ourselves.
Yeah, that's the only person we can actually control, really, is ourselves. Can't control the actions of someone else. You can attempt to, but unless they actually want to do it or
Right.
you force them, they're not going to do it.
Yep.
They have to do it because they want to do it. All right. So I want to turn the page and I want to ask you about what's next for Ernest, because I know you got some stuff that's coming up. Like I mentioned in the intro, you are, just recently named the secretary for the Next Level Speakers Academy chapter in
Yeah.
Chicago. I know you got you already have one book, right? Do you have another book that's coming up?
I have 4 ebooks,
Four
but
ebooks.
yeah,
Okay.
but I'm actually working on 4 full hardcover books, right?
Hey, that's there's
Good
nothing
stuff.
wrong with
Yeah,
that.
I'm trying to get them out. They all up here, and it's sometimes it's hard to get it out of here and get it on paper. But I am in the process of physically writing. I started on 2 of them. I
Okay.
started on 2 of them, so I am in the process of writing those 2. Then I got 2 more that's already up there. It's like, all right, we got to get them out. And
Ah,
I had put it off once because I was just trying to get so focused on one, and
yeah.
I had a conversation with a author coach, and she was like, "No, if you got the ideas, you got to start them all, because you might get like writer's block on one and be able to switch to the other book, and it might, your thoughts and information might flow, so you don't want to stop the flow of information. You just go, okay, if I can't think of nothing else right now for this book, let me go back to this other one, and so I was like, all right, so I just got multiple starts, right?
There's nothing
Trying to
wrong.
get
I,
to that
I
finish
think
line.
we all have. So now, what are the name of your books?
Well, I'll give you the names of my ebooks. I won't give the
Ebook.
other ones because I'm still working on them.
That's
They
okay.
might
That's
they might
okay.
change. But for my ebooks, I have an ebook called "The Core Four," which adds into the girl dad space, right? Because it's the
Okay.
core four, which is the 4 core values that every daughter should get from her father.
Okay.
And so I'll just give you those. Uh, it's love and affection, affirmation, direction, no guidance, or guidance and direction. It's sort of the same, and then it's protection. Those
Nice.
are those 4 values, and so we go into that. And then we have the males, 2 males from men, right? And so I talk about um, being born as a male, right? But there's a process that you got to go through to become a man. Because being born as a male, we didn't have nothing to do with that. But once we're born to become a man, there are some steps that we have to take. The steps that we make, decisions that we make, and steps that we take, which allow us to be make the final product of being able to call ourselves a man. You know what I mean? And so that's
Yeah.
like a male mentoring type book for like teenagers going into manhood. Then I have the 4 steps to self forgiveness, which is it's called "Forgiving Me." The 4 steps to self forgiveness, because one of the things that I realized, again, talking about the things how our past affects us now, is a lot of us still hold grudges against ourselves for things that we did in the past.
Mhm.
Maybe we messed up a previous relationship that was good. Maybe we quit a job that we should have stayed in. Maybe we gave up on our dreams that we should have held on to. And so now, years later, we're still holding those grudges against ourselves. Like, oh, I should have did that. I shouldn't have did that, and whatever. And so we're like down on ourselves. So this book, the 4 steps to self forgiveness, allows us to go through 4 steps to be able to say, okay, let me look at what happened at that time period, where I was emotionally, where I was mentally, and being able to walk ourselves through that and say, oh, I was just in a space, at that time, and I can forgive myself because I can acknowledge that's where I was, And so one of the things I talk about is going through my depression. When my mom and my stepmom passed away, there may have been some decisions that I made at that time that I'm not proud of. But if I can acknowledge that I was going through depression, that I was, emotionally off balance at that time period, then I can say, oh, okay, I can forgive myself for that. I don't have to keep holding that against myself that I made this bad decision, because I can acknowledge I wasn't myself, during that time period. And so that book, again, that's the Forgiving Me, the 4 Steps to Self-Forgiveness. And then lastly, I got an ebook called Start Your Podcast Now, since we're in this space and people kept asking me about starting a podcast. So I've made that into a book. So all 4 of those ebooks can be found at ebooksbyejames.com. I made it real simple.
Okay, and I'm going to drop that down in the link just to make sure. I'm going to put that in the bio, so people, I'll put it in the chat so people can actually see where to go purchase those books at, because you got a lot of great information in there for basically everything that you talk about as far as to help people heal. So that's phenomenal. And even starting a podcast. I'm telling y'all, it's not as easy as y'all
Right.
think. However, if you do, we're going to make sure you get those steps. All right. So last thing I want to ask you about, I know you got TED Talk coming up, don't you?
Yes. So I got my first TED Talk coming up October 5th. Yeah, that's coming up, and I'm looking forward to that. Definitely won't be my last one. I think I'm thinking I'm probably do like at least 3. But this is gonna be my first one. So I'm excited about that. And also going back to, mentioning about things that's coming up this year, we're actually doing our second Surviving Suicidal Thoughts and Ideation event. So that's coming up on September 28th.
I think the show might air by then. You should air. I'll probably air it. It should be aired by then, but we'll make sure I get that information out. I'm definitely going to make sure, especially because that's something that's needed. So you said it's September 28th. I'll make sure I drop that information in there.
So this is going to be our second year of doing this event. We're going to try to do it every year in the month of September. And that's with an organization called the Forgiveness Mission that I've been a part of the last 2 years or so. And with that, we do free virtual workshops about forgiveness every other month, right? And so that's kind of where the Forgiving Me ebook was birthed, was doing those conversations and talking about forgiveness, what it means to forgive, forgiving others, and things of that nature. And just having a conversation. I had a young lady ask about forgiving yourself, and I kind of went into this explanation. And after I said it, I said, okay, I got to use that, because this just came off the top of my head at the moment. I was like, okay, I got to take that and do a little research on it. And so the Forgiving Me, the 4 Steps to Self-Forgiveness was born from that. But yeah, just a lot of moving parts right now. Again, I'm a mentor. I joined the Champs Mentor Group, being the secretary of Next Level Speakers Academy for the Chicago chapter. Very proud of that. Doing that, and the suicide thing event is coming up. The TEDx talk is coming up. So I got a lot of moving parts, man. I can't wait till I'm able to financially support myself, where I can just do all purpose and yeah. That's then man, we're gonna be old and popping when they get there. You think
we already know that? We already know, like EC and Jeremy both say, it's like when you do what you're supposed to do, the money gonna come. You're not gonna have to worry about it, because as long as you're taking care of the people, then it's God's gonna take care of you. So it's coming, because you got a lot of good things that you're doing to try to help people, and you're pouring into so many people, and your heart is in the right place. So God, they brought you this far. You already knew you a pastor's kid, so I'm not telling you nothing you don't already know. He brought you this far to turn his back on you. We already know this.
yeah. And I'll tell you what, one thing that I've learned and over the last couple of years, going through my divorce, losing my mom, my dad's still here, thank God. But losing my mom, going through my divorce, and just really kind of going through a midlife crisis too, because I'm 48 now. So right around this time, we started, have those conversations, like, okay, who am I now? As I'm getting older. One thing that I really learned to come to grips with is something we learned in the church, early, and is all things work for the good of those that love the Lord, right? And when you're really able to embrace that and really look at it and see how even those things that may look bad, where it leads to, because it was out of my divorce and realizing, coming out of divorce and then realizing about my connection with the fatherless daughters that led me on this path that I'm at now, to have the podcast, to even be invited on someone else's podcast, and all the things that has came into the last couple of years. I don't think, had I still been married or not going through divorce, I would have never thought about my connection to fatherless daughters, which was the thing that kicked off everything, And so, yes, I hate that my, end up going through a divorce, even though me and my ex-wife are very good friends. And I definitely appreciate her, even for her role that she plays in the life of my daughter. My daughter's 21. They have an amazing relationship. They don't have nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? Like, it's just them. They have their own relationship. And so, unfortunately, we did go through a divorce, but it was that divorce that sparked everything that I'm doing now. All
Yeah.
the things that been active in now. So now I'm at a place that I really can look back and say it don't even matter what things I face on tomorrow. I know it's all gonna work out for my good. And so now I'm just like, all right, whatever life has to bring, just bring it, because I know on the other side of it, God got some blessings.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is an amazing testimony, 100%. And it just once you take emotions out of it, you can actually find that you can be friends with somebody that you had a child with. And that, because I'm sure it was with me, you think about what's the best thing for the child.
Right. Yeah.
And to move past the emotional trauma, whatever happened, and think about, okay, I need to be here and have a good relationship with this person for my child.
Right, right. And then that also goes back what we said earlier, is really dealing with your own self and your own healing, because once you heal, then you can easily be like, all right, we ain't got to be friends. You know what I'm saying? But you still have a role as a father, you still have a role as a mother to be active in the life of your child. And they have to love you. I don't, you know what I mean? But they need to love you, you know what I mean? But we still we can co-parent, and what they used to say in church, govern yourselves accordingly.
Yes, absolutely. That's it. That is it. All right, Ernest. So my last question I have for you, I asked all my guests this question, is the title of my show is Alpha Intuition. So when you hear that phrase, what does it mean to you?
Well, so when I think of the word alpha, a lot of times it's equated to men, like alpha males, but I think about leadership, right? And then intuition, I believe, is our God-given thoughts and processes of what that looks like to know. So I think about putting those together is that leadership that we know, right? We know from the inside that we're just God-given. We talk about being parents. Like, there's no rule book. You know what I'm saying? Everybody has an idea, but when we go forth to lead our families and lead our children, there's a part that God has already placed in us. It's like, all right, I gave you some sense about this thing. And so rely on what I gave you as a leader, and then lean on me as God, and we can work out the the missing spaces. So that's how I see it when I hear alpha information. Alpha intuition is leadership and God-given information that you have.
Yes, that is phenomenal. All right. Oh my goodness, this has been such an amazing episode. And you guys, I put all Ernest's information on the bottom where you can reach out to him through his email address if you want to book Ernest for an event. You want to look at some of his podcasts that he has on there for Deal, Heal. What was the third one? I forgot it.
Deal, heal, fulfill.
Heal, I'm close. Deal, Heal, and
Yeah,
Fulfill,
yeah,
or
yeah.
the
Yeah, it's
Dark.
Deal Heal Fulfill is the dealhealfulfill.org is the website,
There
and
we
which is also my mission. But it's the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. You guys can find me there, and the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. You guys can find me there. But if you go to YouTube, we actually took our YouTube channel and turned it into a podcasting network. So if you go to the Deal to Heal podcasting network on YouTube, you will find both of the podcasts there, as well as the episodes from me and my brother's podcast, as well as my sister's podcast, which is a Bible study podcast that she's been doing for like 3 or 4 years now. But all of those is there. And if you guys log in there, stay connected with that, because we're going to be bringing you more amazing podcasts down the line. I fell in love with this space now that I'm in it. And so I'm just like, okay, how many podcasts can I have? How many different ways?
Come on, Tyler Perry. You're going to be the Tyler Perry of podcasting. Come on with it.
Yeah, hey, I'm down
Comedy shows.
for it.
No, I love it 100%. That is phenomenal. I love it. And I think I've watched a couple of episodes of the Girl Dad podcast. I'm probably saying it
Mhm.
wrong, but
No,
that
that's
Girl
it.
Dad discussions.
Mhm.
And it was really, really good. I was very intrigued by it. So you guys, it's great information out there. Go watch Ernest. Go get some information. If you want to know how to get your podcast started, he got plenty of them. So he can definitely help you out in that avenue as well. So but I'm also going to put the information in about the awareness day that you spoke about.
Mhm.
That's coming up. You said September 28th.
28.
And I know you're going to get up there and do your thing when you get ready to get your TED Talk done on October 4th.
October
So
5th. Yeah, October
definitely
5th.
looking forward to seeing that once it comes out. 100%. Well, Ernest, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. I am more than ecstatic to have you on the show, and I look forward to us doing great things together. I know we're both in Next Level Speakers Academy in the podcasting space. So, and also in the AI resistant job space. So we're going to be doing
Yes.
some things.
Yep. Yeah. This won't be the last time y'all see us together. We're gonna be doing some stuff. It's gonna be some big things coming.
Exactly. All right, guys. I want to thank you guys for tuning in today for this awesome discussion I had with Mr. Ernest. And you guys, if you think that there are some topics out there that you want to hear on my show, let me know, and I'll make sure that I get somebody on here so we can handle those topics for you. And as always, if you like what you heard today, leave a message or leave me a comment. And if you really like today's show, just make sure you like, subscribe, and then share. And you guys can also connect with us on social media. As you see, Ernest is scrolling across the bottom. And I also have mine over here at Keisha the Electrician. You guys already know who I am. If you're not connected with me, then you must be new to this show. So if you are, just make sure that you connect with me on Instagram. And once again, make sure that you like and subscribe. Now, as I always say, you guys already know that the journey to the top of any mountain begins with one single step. So thank you for tuning in to Alpha Intuition. Don't stop, keep climbing. As I like to always say, y'all make sure you keep that energy. Peace.